Days Gone is everything I expected it to be, and I'm still having a hard time figuring out whether that is a good or a bad thing. Days Gone released to mixed critical success, but has exceeded its sales, becoming the biggest physical release this year so far, and is clearly admired by the general player base. So did the critics get it wrong? Or are we simply happy settling for an average game that ticks all of the right boxes? One thing that's for certain is that Days Gone is the best open world zombie game we've ever played. And despite the developers trying to distance themselves from being labelled as a zombie game, Days Gone definitely fits into that category, but absolutely nails it. From its visual setting to its survival gameplay mechanics, it definitely gets a lot right. The world is set in the Pacific Northwest and is one of the most lived-in gameplay worlds I've ever experienced. The same way Red Dead Redemption 2 captivates you with its ambient wilderness sound and peaceful forests, but instead with ripped up tarmac and abandoned cars littering the roads, torn down houses with gutted insides, military base camps left abandoned, and the eerie sound of a freaker swarm close by. With a dynamic weather system in place also, Days Gone really draws you into its world, immersing you in a way I have not experienced in a zombie game since The Last of Us. How you navigate this wasteland terrain is with your bike, which again, similar to Red Dead Redemption 2, is a pivotal part of the game's mechanics, and helps you draw more into the world of Days Gone. Your bike is basically your safe haven throughout the entire game. While navigating throughout the world, you have to keep an eye on your fuel, which you have to top up at gas stations or find fuel cans scattered throughout the world when you're running low. And also, you have to perform repairs on your bike when it receives too much damage. I am always wary when mechanics like this are added to the game, as they can become more of a hindrance and annoyance than something that actually helps the game. But the management of the bike is definitely balanced perfectly, so that you're not constantly having to repair and refuel your bike. But if you aren't paying attention to it, you might find yourself in a situation you can't escape from, which brings an added layer of tension to the game. The handling of the bike is something which the developers could have easily messed up, as I have played many games that include bike riding, and they tend to make it either too rigid or too flimsy. But Days Gone definitely nails the handling of the bike, making it easy to learn but difficult to master when taking into consideration that different terrains affect the handling of the bike. Deacon, who is the main character you'll play as throughout the game, has a very wide range of mechanics to tackle missions in your desired way, which is great for someone like myself who prefers a more tactical approach than guns blazing. Most missions can be tackled either stealth or loud, with big open environments allowing for short or far distance approaches to each objective. Throughout the game you'll fight both freakers and also bandits, and you can customize your loadout so that it suits your playstyle. Deacon has to constantly loot when he's on the road to be able to maintain his bike's health and also his own. Looting from cars might also find you resources that you can use to craft molotovs and traps. Deacon does benefit from a skill tree as well, which has 3 pillars: melee, ranged, survival. Despite the fact you can level yourself up, Deacon never feels overpowered, and even with most of these skills unlocked, you can still easily be taken down by a small group of freakers or a straight shot from a bandit. As mentioned previously, your main enemies are freakers and bandits. The bandits have outposts across the map that you have to seize to unlock fast travel points and increase the trust of your allied camps. When fighting bandits, despite being able to put you down quite easily, they suffer from pretty dumb AI, which you can easily manipulate to get the upper hand. This is disappointing as the game so far has done so much to immerse me that whenever I encounter bandits I always feel myself losing that little sense of immersion as they are so dumb. Freakers, on the other hand, are super impressive and super scary, especially early on in the game. When starting out, A group of 4 will kill you easily if you try to take them head on. Once you get further into the game though, you'll encounter more than 100 Freakers at a time, which travel in swarms, and if you choose to attack them rather than avoid them, it'll certainly be a challenge to come out on top. Similar as to how I felt with the bike, this was something the developers of Days Gone could have easily messed up, making the Freakers way too weak or way too strong. But there's a good balance here, where you have a high challenge that is still manageable. You'll meet various camps throughout the game, all with their own ecosystems and agendas. The leaders of each camp will task you with missions that if you complete will gain you trust with that camp. Trust is essentially the currency in Days Gone, which is definitely a nice touch and not something we have seen before. Each camp specialises in different areas, such as upgrades for your bike or new guns for you to unlock. By performing enough missions and gaining enough trust, you can then purchase these from each individual camp. Despite being a good structure for upgrading, the actual upgrades themselves are quite lackluster. Deacon's bike can be upgraded and changed visually, but they are all quite minimal upgrades visually, which can make them less exciting. Had you been able to buy more powerful bikes and then upgrade those also, might have been a better use of the bike's upgrade tree. The weapons you can purchase cannot be upgraded or customized, which is another area which I believe they missed out on. For example, you can't add a long range scope or laser sight to your rifle. Some might see this as a bit of a nitpick, but I felt this was definitely a missed opportunity, and something which would have perhaps encouraged me to perform more side missions for that camp. And so we move on to the final part of Days Gone. And this is the area where it all falls apart. And that is the story. The story of Days Gone follows the life of Deacon, 2 years after a global pandemic leaves the majority of the population as Freakers, with those not infected left to band together and survive. Deacon, along with his friend Boomer, have been trying to survive out in the wilderness when he runs into a scientist who was one of the last people to see his presumed dead wife, Sarah. And that is essentially the basic premise of Days Gone. And the issue I have with it is, I just can't buy into the relationship of Sarah and Deacon. We're shown flashbacks throughout the game, which attempt to make us more invested in Deacon's relationship and mission, but the voice acting and dialogue between the two is weak, and literally feels like two people reading off a script inside a booth.
Anyway.
So what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?
You know, I ask myself that all the time. I do research. I study things.
Thanks. Had no idea what research was.
Sorry, I do plants.
You study plants?
Yeah.
When you can't buy into your main character's main story arc, it's hard to really care that much for the rest. As I said, you meet various other camps with their own leaders, which you work with to help further your own personal goals. And each leader has an interesting background and distinct motives to set them apart from other camps. But none really seem to have a clear end goal. And now I know some of you might argue that the end goal is to just survive. But to have a successful narrative and a satisfying story, you need to give us, the player, more than just getting by. Had this been the first zombie game I've ever played, I might have not been so harsh on the story, but it's not. And that pretty much alludes to my conclusion of Days Gone. It's the zombie game built on the trials and errors of the vast amount of games before it, and with a cliche story we've seen 1,000 times before. I sometimes wonder if they wrote the script while watching World War Z in between watching the Walking Dead series. I've heard it said that had this game come out 3 years ago, it would have been received very differently. And I can 100% agree with that. It ticks all the boxes of a great zombie game, but suffers from a rehashed plot and an unbelievable character arc. So, despite Days Gone ticking all the boxes, we've seen it all before. if you're thinking about getting Days Gone, I'd probably say it's best to wait until it's on sale. Because at the end of the day, this game will bring you a lot of fun and you will enjoy your time with it. But you won't be able to shake the sense of deja vu that you've seen this all before. It's been your boy TJ Fowl, and I'll see you in the next one.